Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving right into the life of a man who literally penned the soaring ideals of American liberty, but at the exact same time lived a life deeply entangled in the very systems of oppression he sometimes criticized. It's a fascinating, honestly, kind of head-spinning journey. To really grasp the foundation of the United States, we absolutely have to understand the paradox that is Thomas Jefferson. Let's get into it.
To do that, we've broken this down into 5 parts. We'll look at the revolutionary mind, the expansionist president, the Renaissance man, the great contradiction of his life, and finally, his complex legacy.
Starting right off with Part 1, the revolutionary mind, where we look at the architect of a nation's ideals.
So, let's trace the rapid evolution of his intellect. Born into Virginia's wealthy planter class in 1743, Jefferson's entire worldview was blown wide open in 1760 at the College of William and Mary. That's where he first encountered Enlightenment heavyweights like John Locke and Francis Bacon. And get this, he was studying up to 15 hours a day. That intense foundation totally paved the way for his legal career and ultimately led him to Philadelphia. There, at just 33 years old, which is pretty wild to think about, he was tasked with drafting the Declaration of Independence.
The context behind these iconic words is honestly fascinating. Jefferson drafted this mostly in isolation, just sitting in a rented room on Market Street in Philadelphia over a couple of weeks in June 1776. Drawing heavily on those Enlightenment ideals of natural rights, he penned what historians often call the most potent and consequential words in American history. And the reason this matters so much today? Well, he wasn't just writing a breakup letter to King George. He literally captured the spirit of a brand new nation on paper, setting up the baseline DNA for how we think about human rights right up to this very second.
Now those foundational beliefs birthed a very distinct political philosophy that we now call Jeffersonian democracy. The crucial takeaway here is understanding his ultimate vision for America. He definitely didn't want a nation of crowded, corrupt cities. Nope. He championed the independent, self-sustaining farmer, the agrarian yeoman. He firmly believed that keeping power local and decentralized, along with building a strict wall of separation between church and state, were absolutely the only ways to prevent the exact kind of tyranny they had just fought a literal war to escape.
And man, this ideological clash fundamentally shaped early America. Think of it like a heavyweight match. On one side, you have Jefferson's vision for a decentralized agrarian republic. On the other side, you've got Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton pushing hard for a powerful, centralized industrial powerhouse complete with a national bank. Jefferson vehemently opposed this. He was terrified it would just breed monopolies and corruption. This intense, very public debate essentially birthed the first party system in the U.S., giving rise to Jefferson's Democratic-Republican Party.
Moving on to Part 2, the expansionist president, where he ends up doubling the republic.
The massive scale of the Louisiana Purchase is just staggering when you really look at it. 827,987 square miles. Back in 1803, Jefferson initially just wanted to buy New Orleans from France, basically to secure river shipping rights. But then, Napoleon unexpectedly turns around and offers up the entire Louisiana Territory for $15 million. If you do the math, that breaks down to roughly $18 a square mile. I mean, what a steal, right?
The ripple effects of this were absolutely massive. With a single stroke of the pen, Jefferson doubled the geographic footprint of the United States. He completely removed major European military threats from the western borders, secured just an unimaginable amount of natural resources, and, as a direct result, immediately kickstarted the legendary Western mapping expeditions.
But before sending the corpse of discovery westward, Jefferson was incredibly hands-on. He didn't just sign a check and say, "Good luck." Actually, he personally prepped Meriwether Lewis, giving him a VIP pass to his massive private library at Monticello. He literally tutored Lewis in the sciences, navigation, and botany himself. He also gave them incredibly strict instructions to meticulously document the uncharted American frontier, which included recording the vocabularies of the indigenous tribes they encountered.
Now here's what's genuinely surprising about the financial aftermath. Despite dropping $15 million on the Louisiana Territory, Jefferson, working alongside his Treasury Secretary Albert Gallatin, somehow managed to successfully slash the national debt over his 2 terms. They actually brought it down from $83 million to $57 million. How'd they pull that off? Basically by aggressively cutting taxes, shutting down unnecessary government offices, and drastically shrinking the military, especially the Navy, since it was peacetime.
Which brings us to Part 3, the Renaissance man. We're talking architecture, archaeology, and academics.
6,500 volumes. That is how many books we're talking about here. Jefferson treasured books so deeply that he organized his massive personal library by memory, reason, and imagination, not just alphabetically. Fast forward to 1814, after the British burned Washington and destroyed the original Library of Congress. Jefferson stepped up and sold his entire private collection to the government for nearly $24,000 just to jumpstart its rebuilding. He famously told John Adams, "I cannot live without books." And honestly, he wasn't kidding.
And all those books fueled an incredibly diverse, almost chaotic range of pursuits. I mean, he pioneered American archaeological trench methods just to study Monacan burial mounds. He designed both the architecture and the entire curriculum for the University of Virginia. He literally took a razor to a Bible, cutting and pasting his own version to remove the miracles and focus purely on the moral teachings of Jesus. He even presented actual scientific research on an extinct giant sloth, and he spoke multiple languages fluently, convinced that Greek was the perfect language. His curiosity was just absolutely boundless.
But we have to look at the whole picture. So, Part 4, The Great Contradiction, the philosopher of freedom and the reality of bondage.
Ideologically speaking, Jefferson completely recognized the horror of slavery. In his book, Notes on the State of Virginia, he didn't mince words. He explicitly called it a moral evil. And early in his career, he actually advocated for gradual emancipation. He tried to ban slavery in the Western Territories, and he eventually signed legislation as president to ban the international slave trade.
But here's the crucial point of this explainer, and it's the reality on the ground. Despite all his soaring rhetoric about freedom, Jefferson's immense wealth, his fine wine, his thousands of books, and those grand architectural projects at Monticello, they all relied entirely on the forced labor of roughly 600 enslaved individuals over the course of his lifetime. He sold over 100 people just to cover his debts. Enslaved children literally staffed his nail factory. And when he died, his will only freed 5 people. 5.
And this contradiction deepens significantly when we look at the historical reality of Sally Hemings. Now, for centuries, this was fiercely debated, but today, extensive DNA testing combined with historical records has led to a really solid consensus. The evidence strongly indicates that Jefferson fathered multiple children with Hemings, who was an enslaved domestic worker at Monticello. Now, while he did promise to free their children when they came of age, the stark reality is that Sally Hemings herself was never formally freed by Jefferson.
Which naturally leads us to our final section, Part 5, A Complex Legacy. Let's look at his final years at Monticello.
So after leaving the presidency in 1809, he retreated to Monticello, heavily burdened by some pretty massive debt. But his mind never really stopped. During these years, he founded the University of Virginia and managed to rekindle this extraordinary historic correspondence with his former friend turned bitter political rival John Adams. And then, in just an unbelievable twist of historical fate, both Jefferson and Adams died on the exact same day. And not just any day, July 4th, 1826, literally the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. You really can't write this stuff.
Let's see how all of this builds to his final statement to the world. Take a look at the epitaph Jefferson explicitly wrote for his own tombstone. Notice what is glaringly missing here. He completely, intentionally omitted his 2 terms as President of the United States. Why? Because he didn't want to be remembered for the political power he held, but solely for the ideas he championed and the institutions he built to educate the mind and free the spirit.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you to really ponder. How do we today balance the man who authored the soaring universal promise of human equality with the grim realities of his lifelong reliance on slavery? It's a complex, incredibly uncomfortable, yet absolutely essential question for anyone trying to truly understand the foundational roots of the United States. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.